The flour fell through the sifter like snow in December, and Clara Sutton watched each grain tumble into the wooden bowl below, her hands moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who had made bread 1,000 times before. She stood in the small kitchen of her bakery in Boise, Idaho Territory, on a crisp morning in October of 1883, unaware that the man who would change everything was about to walk through her door. The bell above the entrance chimed, and Clara looked up from her work to see a tall cowboy silhouetted against the morning sun. He removed his hat as he stepped inside, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. Dust covered his boots and the lower half of his trousers, suggesting he had ridden hard to get here. "Morning, madam," he said, his voice rough from trail riding. "Heard tell you make the best bread in the territory." Clara set down her sifter and wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "I do my best. What can I get for you?" "Whatever you recommend," he said, stepping closer to the counter. "Been eating hardtack for 3 weeks straight. Could use something that does not break my teeth." She smiled at that, unable to help herself. "The sourdough is fresh from this morning. I have some cinnamon rolls too, just finished." "I will take both," he said without hesitation. "And maybe some of that bread I can take with me for the road." Clara moved to gather his order, wrapping the warm bread in brown paper. As she worked, she could feel him watching her, not in an uncomfortable way but with genuine interest. She had grown used to men looking at her since her husband died 2 years ago, but this felt different somehow. "You new to Boise?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Just passing through," he said. "Got work at the Morrison Ranch about 10 miles south, starting tomorrow. The Morrison place, that is good land. They treat their hands fair." He nodded, pulling coins from his pocket to pay. Their fingers brushed as she took the money, and Clara felt a jolt of something she had not felt in a very long time. She pulled her hand back quickly, professional distance reasserting itself. "Name is Nathan Oliver," he said, "in case you were wondering." "Clara Sutton," she replied, meeting his eyes. "Welcome to Boise, Mr. Oliver. Nathan is fine." He gathered his purchases and headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "I expect I will be back this way regular, if that is all right with you." "It is a public establishment," Clara said, but her voice was softer than she intended. "I am here every day except Sunday." After he left, Clara stood in the empty bakery for a long moment before returning to her flour and her sifter. She told herself the flutter in her chest was nothing, that she was just being foolish. But her hands shook slightly as she resumed her work, and the flour fell through the mesh in uneven bursts instead of the steady stream she usually maintained. Nathan Oliver did come back, just as he had said he would. 3 days later he appeared at opening time, his hat in his hands and a tentative smile on his weathered face. "Morning, Clara," he said, and she noticed he used her given name without the formality of before. "Good morning," she replied. "How is the work treating you?" "Fair enough. Long days, but I am used to that." He leaned against the counter, seeming in no hurry despite the early hour. "Truth is, I did not come just for the bread." Clara felt her heart skip, but she kept her expression neutral. "No, no, madam. I came because I have been thinking about you since I left here 3 days ago, and I figure that means something worth paying attention to." She should have been offended by such directness, or at least pretended to be. Instead, she found herself setting down her measuring cup and giving him her full attention. "Mr. Oliver, I barely know you." "Nathan," he corrected gently, "and that is true enough. But I would like to change that if you are willing. Maybe I could take you to supper sometime." "I do not think that would be appropriate," Clara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "People talk in a town this size." "Let them talk," Nathan said. "I am too old to worry about gossip, and I am guessing you might be too." Clara considered this. She was 28 years old, widowed, and running her own business. She had already weathered the worst that gossip could do when her husband died and left her with debts she had to work day and night to pay off. What did it matter if people talked about her having supper with a cowboy? "One meal," she said finally, "but not supper. Come by on Sunday afternoon after church. I will make us lunch." Nathan's face lit up in a way that made him look younger than his 32 years. "I will be here." "What time?" "1 o'clock. And do not be late." He was early, of course, arriving at 12:30 with his hair slicked back and wearing what was clearly his best shirt. Clara had spent the morning cooking, preparing fried chicken and potatoes and green beans from her small garden. She had even made a pie, though she told herself it was not anything special, just good hospitality. They ate at the small table in her living quarters behind the bakery, and the conversation flowed easier than Clara had expected. Nathan told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about drifting west to find work and a new start. Clara shared her own story, about marrying young to a man who turned out to be better at making promises than keeping them, about his death in a riding accident that left her with nothing but the bakery and a mountain of debt. "You paid it all off?" Nathan asked, genuine admiration in his voice. "Every cent," Clara said with quiet pride. "Took me 18 months of working dawn to midnight, but I did it. The bakery is mine, free and clear." "That takes strength," Nathan said. "Most people would have given up." "I thought about it," Clara admitted. "But I did not have anywhere else to go, and I was not about to let his creditors take the one thing I had left." Nathan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was simple but intimate, and Clara did not pull away. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, warm and solid against her flour-softened fingers. "I am glad you did not give up," he said quietly. "Otherwise I would have ridden right through Boise without stopping, and that would have been a damn shame." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You do not know me well enough to say that." "I know enough," Nathan said. "I know you work hard and you are honest and you make the best bread I have ever tasted. I know you have kind eyes and a pretty smile, though you do not use it nearly enough. I know I want to spend more time with you and see where this goes." "Nathan," Clara said, and then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. "Too fast?" he asked, reading her hesitation. "Maybe," she said, "but also maybe not. I do not know. I have not done this in a long time." "Neither have I," Nathan admitted. "Not like this anyway, but I reckon when something feels right, you do not overthink it." They finished their meal, and Nathan helped her wash the dishes, standing beside her at the basin and drying each plate with a careful attention that told her he was a man who did not mind domestic work. It was such a small thing, but it meant something to Clara, who had spent so many years doing everything alone. When he left that evening, he kissed her cheek at the door, gentle and respectful. "Can I see you again next Sunday?" he asked. "Yes," Clara said, not even pretending to deliberate. Same time. Fall turned toward winter, and Nathan came every Sunday without fail. He also stopped by the bakery several times a week, usually in the early morning before work or in the evening after. Sometimes he bought bread, but mostly he just came to talk, to lean against the counter and tell her about his day or ask about hers. Clara found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She had loved her husband in a quiet, dutiful way, but this felt different. With Nathan, there was a spark, a connection that made her feel alive in ways she had forgotten were possible. One evening in late November, Nathan arrived after dark, looking troubled. Clara was just closing up the bakery, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, ushering him inside out of the cold. Nathan removed his hat and turned it in his hands, not meeting her eyes. Had some trouble at the ranch today. One of the other hands, man named Garrett, he took issue with me courting you. Clara felt her stomach tighten. What kind of issue? Said some things I will not repeat. About you being a widow, about me having no business with a respectable woman when I am just a drifter. Got ugly enough that Morrison had to step in. Are you hurt? Clara asked, noticing for the first time a redness around his left eye that would probably be a bruise by morning. Nothing that will not heal, Nathan said. He finally looked at her, and his expression was raw with emotion. But I need you to understand something, Clara. I am not a perfect man. I have got a temper, and when someone insults a woman I care about, I do not always think before I act. I have lived rough and I have made mistakes, and there are probably a dozen things about me that would give you good reason to walk away right now. Clara stepped closer to him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Is that what you want? For me to walk away? God, no, Nathan said, the words coming out harsh with feeling. But I will not lie to you about who I am. I will not pretend to be something I am not. She thought about this, about everything she had learned about Nathan Oliver in the past 6 weeks. She thought about his kindness, his reliability, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She thought about the loneliness she had felt for so long, and how that had lifted since he came into her life. Come with me, she said, taking his hand and leading him into the kitchen. She went to her work table where she had been preparing dough for the morning's baking. Her sifter sat ready, flour piled beside it. Watch, Clara said, and she began to sift, letting the flour fall through the fine mesh in steady, even streams. See how this works. All the lumps and impurities stay in the sifter, but the good flour passes through. That is what makes the bread rise properly, what makes it light and perfect. Nathan watched her, confusion evident on his face. Clara set down the sifter and turned to face him fully. But here is the thing, Nathan. If you sift out everything, you are left with so little, a handful of flour from a whole bag. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is without flaws. She picked up a measure of unsifted flour and poured it directly into a bowl. This is real life. This is real people. All mixed together, rough and imperfect but still good, still capable of making something worthwhile. Clara, Nathan said, his voice catching. I am not asking you to be perfect, she continued. I am asking you to be honest, to be yourself, and to sift through my flaws the same way I will sift through yours. We take what is good and we work with what is not together. Nathan closed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. You are saying yes. To all of this. To me. I am saying yes, Clara confirmed, and then his lips were on hers, and the kiss was everything she had been too afraid to hope for. It was hungry and tender and full of promise, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. I love you, Nathan said, the declaration simple and unadorned. I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Clara Sutton. I love you too, Clara whispered, and it felt like breaking a dam, like releasing something she had been holding back for fear of getting hurt again. Stay with me tonight. It was bold for her to ask, improper by any measure, but Clara found she did not care. She was a grown woman, a widow, and Nathan was the man she wanted. Let the town gossip if they would. Nathan's answer was another kiss, deeper this time, and Clara lost herself in it. They made their way to her bedroom, shedding clothes between kisses, and what followed was passionate and sweet, and everything Clara had been missing without knowing how much she needed it. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Nathan's arm around her shoulders and Clara's head on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and feel the rise and fall of his breathing. Marry me, Nathan said into the darkness. Clara lifted her head to look at him. What? "Marry me," he repeated. "I know we have not known each other long, but I know my own heart. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to help you in the bakery and eat your cooking and grow old watching you sift flour. Marry me, Clara." She should have been cautious, should have asked for time to think. But Clara had spent 2 years being careful, being sensible, building her life one safe step at a time. Nathan made her want to be reckless. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Boise. Morrison gave Nathan the day off and even came to the wedding himself, along with a handful of other ranch hands and several of Clara's regular customers. It was not a grand affair, but it was genuine, and when Nathan slipped a simple gold band on Clara's finger, she felt more married than she ever had the first time around. The winter that followed was the happiest of Clara's life. Nathan moved into the rooms behind the bakery, and they fell into an easy rhythm together. He would wake before dawn to help her with the morning baking, strong arms kneading dough while she prepared the ovens. Then he would ride out to the Morrison ranch for his day's work, returning in the evening to find Clara cleaning up from the day's business. They would eat supper together, and Nathan would tell her stories about the ranch while Clara shared the town gossip she had overheard from customers. Then they would retire to bed, and Nathan would make love to her with a tenderness and passion that never seemed to diminish, no matter how many times they came together. In February, Clara realized her monthly bleeding had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then another, before she finally told Nathan over breakfast one morning. "I think I am with child," she said, watching his face carefully for his reaction. Nathan set down his coffee cup slowly, his expression unreadable. Then a smile spread across his face, wide and genuine and full of joy. "Truly, I believe so," Clara said. "It is early yet, but all the signs are there." Nathan came around the table and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby," he said, laughing. "God, Clara, we are going to be parents." His joy was infectious, and Clara found herself laughing too, the last of her worry melting away. She had not been sure how Nathan would take the news, whether he would feel trapped or burdened, but she should have known better. This was Nathan, who had never been anything but honest about his feelings, who wore his heart on his sleeve for her to see. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Clara worked in the bakery as long as she could, though Nathan fussed over her constantly, insisting she sit down whenever possible and take breaks throughout the day. In July, when the heat made working in front of the ovens nearly unbearable, Nathan finally convinced her to hire help. The girl they brought on was named Martha, only 16 but a hard worker with a good hand for pastry. She took over the bulk of the physical labor while Clara supervised and handled the money. It galled Clara to step back from the work she loved, but Nathan pointed out that she could return to it after the baby came, and he was right. In late August, on a sweltering afternoon when Clara was convinced she could not possibly get any more uncomfortable, her water broke. Nathan had just returned from the ranch, and he took one look at the puddle on the floor and went pale. "It is time," he asked, his voice higher than normal. "It is time," Clara confirmed, gripping the edge of the table as the first contraction hit. Nathan ran for the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson who had delivered half the babies in Boise. She arrived quickly and took charge, sending Nathan to boil water and fetch clean towels. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Nathan stayed by Clara's side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement when she was sure she could not go on. Finally, as dawn light crept through the windows, their son was born. He came into the world screaming, healthy and strong, with a thick cap of dark hair and his father's gray eyes. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him up and placed him in Clara's arms, and she felt a rush of love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Nathan leaned over them both, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "He is perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." They named him James, after Clara's father, and he became the center of their world. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, coming home from the ranch each evening eager to hold his son. He would walk James around the bakery in the early mornings when the baby was fussy, bouncing him gently and singing off key cowboy songs until James settled. Clara watched them together and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was what she had always wanted, she realized. Not just a husband or a child, but a family built on love and partnership and genuine affection. With her first husband, she had been so young, so focused on doing what was expected of her that she had never stopped to think about what she actually wanted. But Nathan had given her that gift, the freedom to want and to choose and to build something real. When James was 6 months old, Morrison came to Nathan with an offer. His foreman was retiring, and he wanted Nathan to take the position. It meant more responsibility and better pay, but it also meant longer hours and more stress. Nathan discussed it with Clara that evening after James was in bed. "I told Morrison I needed to talk to you first," he said. "It is a good opportunity, but it would mean less time at home, at least in the beginning. I will not take it if you would rather I did not." Clara considered this. The extra money would be useful, especially as James grew and their needs changed. But more than that, she could see that Nathan wanted the job, that he was proud to be asked and eager to prove himself. "Take it," she said. "We will manage. Martha is doing well in the bakery and James and I will be fine." "Are you sure?" Nathan asked. "I am sure," Clara confirmed. "You have supported my work from the beginning. Let me support yours now." Nathan took the job, and true to Clara's word, they managed. The days were busier, and they saw less of each other during the week, but Sunday remained sacred, a day for just the three of them. They would pack a lunch and ride out to a spot by the river, spreading a blanket under the cottonwood trees while James toddled around exploring. On one such Sunday in October, almost exactly 2 years after Nathan had first walked into Clara's bakery, they sat watching their son chase butterflies through the tall grass. Nathan had his arm around Clara's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, content. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Nathan asked. "If I had ridden through Boise without stopping, or if you had turned me down that first time I asked you to supper?" "Sometimes," Clara admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. We are here now, and that is what matters." "I almost did not stop, you know," Nathan said. "I was planning to push through to Caldwell, get work there, but my horse threw a shoe and I had to stop at the smithy. While I was waiting, someone mentioned the bakery, said a pretty widow ran it. I figured I might as well get a decent meal before I moved on." Clara turned to look at him. "I never knew that. Fate," Nathan said with a smile, "or luck, or maybe just a loose horseshoe, but whatever it was, I am grateful for it every single day." "So am I," Clara said and kissed him softly. James came running back to them then, his chubby hands clutching a dandelion gone to seed. He thrust it toward Clara with the proud expression of a child bearing a great treasure. "Flower," he declared, and even though it was not really a flower anymore, Clara took it with the same reverence she would have shown a rose. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, tucking it carefully into her hair. "It is beautiful." Nathan pulled them both close, his family, his world, and thought about that morning 2 years ago when he had walked into a bakery expecting nothing more than fresh bread. He had found so much more, a home and a love and a life worth living. All because Clara Sutton had been willing to look past his rough exterior and see the man underneath. Time passed as it always does, measured in seasons and birthdays and small daily moments. James grew from a toddler into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch on the weekends and helping his mother in the bakery, standing on a stool to reach the counter while Clara taught him to measure and mix. When James was 3, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less anxious about it, confident in her body's ability and excited to give James a sibling. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1888, their daughter was born. They named her Rose, and she was as sweet-tempered as her brother was wild, content to sleep in her mother's arms while chaos unfolded around her. Nathan was promoted again, this time to ranch manager, second only to Morrison himself. It was a position of real authority, and Nathan took to it naturally, his fairness and competence earning him the respect of the ranch hands. The increased income allowed them to expand the bakery, adding a small dining area where customers could sit and enjoy their purchases with coffee or tea. Martha had grown into a skilled baker in her own right, and Clara made her a full partner in the business. Together, they ran one of the most successful establishments in Boise, known not just in town but throughout the territory for the quality of their goods. Life was full and good, but it was not without its challenges. There was the winter when Rose caught pneumonia, and they spent sleepless nights taking turns sitting with her, terrified they might lose her. There was the drought year when the ranch struggled, and Nathan came home exhausted and worried every night. There was the time James broke his arm falling from a tree, and Nathan blamed himself for not watching more carefully. Through it all, Clara and Nathan faced each challenge together, supporting each other the way they had from the beginning. When Nathan was worried, Clara held him and reminded him that they had weathered worse. When Clara was overwhelmed, Nathan took over whatever he could to ease her burden. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Clara with a new house. He had been working with Morrison to buy a parcel of land between town and the ranch, and he had spent months overseeing its construction. It was not grand, but it was solidly built with a big kitchen for Clara and room for their growing family. "When did you do all this?" Clara asked, walking through the empty rooms with wonder. "Been planning it for a year," Nathan admitted. "Morrison helped with the financing, and I have been riding out here every spare moment to oversee the work. I wanted to give you something that was truly ours, built just for us." Clara turned to him with tears in her eyes. "It is perfect, absolutely perfect." They moved in that summer, and Clara loved having the extra space. She set up a proper room for her baking experiments, where she could test new recipes without disrupting the bakery's daily operations. Nathan built a barn for the horses and started a small herd of cattle, working them on weekends with James's enthusiastic if not always helpful assistance. Rose grew into a quiet, observant child who loved reading and drawing. James remained active and adventurous, already talking about becoming a rancher like his father. Clara watched them grow and felt the bittersweetness of parenthood, proud of who they were becoming while mourning the babies they no longer were. More years passed, and Idaho transitioned from territory to statehood in 1890. Boise grew larger and more established, with new businesses opening and the railroad bringing increased prosperity. Clara's bakery thrived, becoming an institution in the community. Martha married one of the ranch hands and had babies of her own, though she continued working at the bakery, bringing her children with her the way Clara once had. Nathan was offered Morrison's position when the older man finally decided to retire. The ranch would be Nathan's to manage completely, a responsibility he did not take lightly. He accepted with Morrison's blessing and threw himself into the work with renewed dedication. On a cool evening in November of 1893, Clara stood in her kitchen sifting flour for the next day's baking. It was a task she still found meditative, even after all these years. The familiar motion of her hands, the soft sound of flour falling through mesh, it grounded her in a way little else did. Nathan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. They were both older now, Nathan's dark hair liberally streaked with gray and lines etched deep around Clara's eyes. But when he held her like this, Clara felt 28 again, standing in her bakery and meeting a cowboy's eyes for the first time. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked softly. "Us," Clara said. "How far we have come, how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one," Nathan countered. "You took a chance on a drifter cowboy with nothing but a horse and a dream." Clara set down her sifter and turned in his arms to face him. "You asked me to sift through your flaws and stay, do you remember?" "That is not quite how I put it," Nathan said with a smile. "It is how I remember it," Clara insisted. "And I am glad I did. Glad I stayed, glad I took the chance. You are the best decision I ever made, Nathan Oliver." "Even better than the bakery," he teased. "Even better than the bakery," Clara confirmed and kissed him. They stood there in the kitchen, flour dust motes dancing in the lamplight, and Clara thought about fate and horseshoes and the thousand small choices that had brought them to this moment. She thought about the girl she had been, young and widowed and alone, and the woman she had become, loved and surrounded by family. "You think we will have grandchildren soon?" Nathan asked, breaking into her thoughts. "James is 22 now, and I saw him making eyes at the Mitchell girl at church last Sunday." "Too soon to tell," Clara said, "but I hope so. I would love to teach a grandchild to bake." "And I would love to teach one to ride," Nathan added, the circle continuing. "The circle continuing," Clara agreed. They were both right, as it turned out. James married Elizabeth Mitchell the following spring, and by the next winter they had made Nathan and Clara grandparents to a baby girl named Clara, after her grandmother. Rose married a few years later to a schoolteacher, and they had 3 children in quick succession, 2 boys and a girl. Nathan proved to be a doting grandfather, just as he had been a devoted father. He would ride into town whenever he could to see the grandchildren, bouncing them on his knee and telling them wild stories about the Old West that Clara suspected were mostly fiction. She did not mind. Let the children have their legends. They would learn the truth of life soon enough. On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the house for a celebration. The table was laden with food, including bread and pastries from the bakery, and the house rang with laughter and conversation. Clara looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at Nathan presiding over it all with pride and joy, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what she had built, what they had built together. Not just a business or a family, but a legacy of love and hard work and partnership. She thought about that young widow in the bakery, sifting flour with mechanical precision, her heart closed off to protect herself from more pain. She wished she could go back and tell that woman not to be afraid, that the cowboy who walked through her door would be worth every risk. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan caught her eye across the crowded room and smiled, that same smile he had given her on their first Sunday together. Clara smiled back, and in that moment, they were not grandmother and grandfather, not business owner and ranch manager. They were just Clara and Nathan, still in love after all these years, still choosing each other every day. Later, after the guests had left and the house was quiet again, They sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the Idaho hills. Nathan held Clara's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. "Tell me something," Nathan said. "If you could go back and do it all again, would you change anything?" Clara considered this seriously. There had been hard times, certainly, moments of fear and pain and uncertainty, but those moments had shaped them, had made them who they were. "No," she said finally. "I would not change a single thing. Every struggle brought us here to this moment. I would live it all again exactly the same way. Even the part where Garrett insulted you and I got in that fight," Nathan asked with a slight smile. "Even that," Clara confirmed. "Because it led to you telling me about your flaws, which led to me telling you about sifting, which led to everything else." "That was a good night," Nathan said softly, remembering. "It was the beginning of this," Clara said, gesturing at the house, the land, the life they had built. "So yes, even that." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to appear in the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and the wind rustled through the cottonwood trees. It was peaceful and perfect, and Clara wanted to hold on to this moment forever. But time moved forward as it always did, bringing both joy and sorrow in equal measure. Morrison died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and Nathan inherited the ranch outright, a final gift from the man who had given him his first real chance. It was bittersweet, accepting such generosity while mourning the man who had made it possible. James took over the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Nathan to step back and take a less active role. Nathan was in his 50s now, still strong and capable but feeling the years of hard work in his joints. He spent more time in town with Clara, often helping out in the bakery or just keeping her company while she worked. One morning, Clara was teaching her oldest granddaughter to sift flour, showing her the gentle motion that produced the best results. The girl, also named Clara but called Clary to avoid confusion, watched with serious concentration. "Why do we sift it, Grandma?" Clary asked. "To make sure it is fine and even," Clara explained. "See how the lumps stay in the sifter? This way we only use the good stuff." "But what if the lumps are good too?" Clary asked with the logic of a 7-year-old. Clara smiled and glanced at Nathan, who was watching from his spot by the window. "Well," she said to her granddaughter, "sometimes the lumps are part of what makes something special. You just have to know when to keep them and when to sift them out." Nathan caught her eye and winked, and Clara knew he was remembering that night in the bakery so many years ago, when she had used this same flour to explain her philosophy on love and acceptance. "That is very wise, Grandma," Clary said solemnly, though Clara suspected she did not fully understand yet. She would someday. They all did eventually. The years continued their steady march. Rose's children grew tall and started families of their own. James and Elizabeth had 2 more children, sons who took to ranching like they were born to it. The bakery changed hands when Martha retired, passing to her daughter who ran it with the same dedication her mother had shown. Clara thought about retiring herself, but she found she could not quite give it up entirely. She still came in several times a week, not to work the ovens anymore, but to teach and to maintain the standards that had made the bakery successful. Nathan often came with her, and they would sit together in the dining area, drinking coffee and watching the world go by. "You remember the first time I came here?" Nathan asked one such morning. They were in their 60s now, both moving slower but still sharp in mind and spirit. "Of course I remember," Clara said. "You were covered in trail dust and desperate for real food." "I was desperate for more than food," Nathan said. "Though I did not know it yet, I was desperate for a home, for someone to belong to." I just did not realize it until I saw you standing there with flour in your hair, looking at me like I might be something more than just another drifter." "You were something more," Clara said. "You always were. Only because you believed it," Nathan replied. "You saw past the dust and the rough edges to the man I wanted to be. You made me believe I could be that man." Clara reached across the table and took his hand, the same hand that had held hers through childbirth and grief and joy and every day in between. "We made each other better," she said. "That is what love does." They sat there until their coffee grew cold, hands linked across the scarred wooden table, and Clara felt the same contentment she had felt on their anniversary years ago. This was enough. This was everything. In the spring of 1903, 20 years after that fateful day when Nathan had first walked into her bakery, Clara and Nathan celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with another family gathering. The house was even more crowded this time, filled with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all carrying pieces of Clara and Nathan forward into the future. James gave a toast, raising his glass and calling for quiet. "To my parents," he said, "who taught us what real partnership looks like, who showed us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day, to many more years together." Everyone echoed the sentiment, glasses clinking and voices raised in celebration. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the beauty of this moment, this life. She looked at Nathan and saw her own emotion reflected in his face. "Thank you," she whispered, though she was not sure what exactly she was thanking him for. For everything, perhaps. For being the man who had walked into her bakery and changed everything. For choosing her every day for 20 years. For the family they had built and the love they had shared. "Thank you," Nathan whispered back, understanding without explanation the way he always did. The party continued late into the night, and when it finally ended and they were alone again, Clara and Nathan found themselves back on the porch, their favorite spot. The stars were brilliant overhead, untouched by the electric lights that were slowly coming to Boise. "Do you ever think about what we will leave behind?" Nathan asked. "All the time," Clara admitted. "I hope they remember us well. I hope they know how much we love them." "They know," Nathan assured her. "How could they not? It is in everything we did, every choice we made. Love is our legacy, Clara. That is what we leave behind." Clara leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder, fitting against him the way she had for 2 decades. "That is a good legacy," she said. "The best," Nathan agreed. They sat together until the cold drove them inside, and then they went to bed in the room they had shared for so many years. Nathan held Clara close, and she traced the familiar lines of his face in the darkness, memorizing them even though she knew them by heart. "I love you," she said, simple words that carried the weight of 20 years and a lifetime of meaning. "I love you too," Nathan replied. "Today, tomorrow, always." They were not young anymore, and they both knew that the years ahead would bring challenges. Bodies wore out, health failed, time always won in the end. But for now they had this moment, this love, this life they had built together. Clara thought about flour falling through a sifter, about choosing what to keep and what to let go. She had kept Nathan, flaws and all, and he had kept her. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone, in the darkness of their bedroom, with Nathan's breath even and steady beside her. Clara felt at peace. She had been so afraid once, afraid to open her heart again after loss, afraid to trust in something as fragile as love. But Nathan had asked her to sift through his flaws and stay, and she had found the courage to do exactly that. It had been worth it. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. It had all been worth it. The years that followed were gentler than those that came before. Nathan and James ran the ranch together, though it was clear James was doing the bulk of the work now. Nathan had earned his rest, and he took it without guilt, spending his days with Clara and their ever-expanding family. Clara finally did retire from the bakery, handing it over completely to Martha's daughter with her blessing. She spent her time gardening and reading and spoiling her great-grandchildren, who adored their great-grandmother with her soft hands and endless patience. They grew old together the way they had always done everything, as a team. When Nathan's knees started to trouble him, Clara made sure he rested. When Clara's eyesight began to fail, Nathan read to her every evening, his voice steady and sure even when the words were not. On a warm evening in June of 1913, 30 years after they had first met, Clara and Nathan sat on their porch watching the sunset. Nathan was 72 now, Clara 68, and they had the weathered look of people who had lived fully and well. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Nathan asked. "Tell me," Clara said. "That first Sunday you invited me for lunch. How nervous I was, how afraid you would see right through me and realize I was just a cowboy with nothing to offer." "You had plenty to offer," Clara said. "You just did not see it yet." "I see it now," Nathan said. "I see everything we built, everyone we love. I see 30 years of choosing each other, and I would not trade a single day of it." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, though she was not sad. These were tears of gratitude, of joy, of a life well lived and well loved. "Neither would I," she said. "Not one single day." They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Somewhere in the house, they could hear the sounds of family, the laughter of great-grandchildren playing before bed. It was the sound of continuity, of life moving forward the way it always did. Nathan took Clara's hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, gnarled now with age but still the hand he loved. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything," Clara replied. "Promise me you will always remember how much I loved you. Even when I am gone, remember that." "Nathan," Clara started, but he shook his head. "We are not young anymore, my love. We both know our time is not infinite. But I need you to know, to really know, that loving you was the best thing I ever did. You made my life mean something." "You made mine mean something too," Clara said through her tears. "You saved me, Nathan. I was just existing before you, just going through the motions. You taught me how to live again." "We saved each other," Nathan said. "That is what love does." They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands and holding on to each other the way they had for 3 decades. And when they finally went inside, they did so together, the way they had done everything since that October morning when a cowboy walked into a bakery and changed 2 lives forever. Nathan passed away in his sleep, 2 years later, his heart simply stopping in the early hours of a spring morning. He died the way he had lived, peacefully and without fuss, his last conscious moment spent kissing Clara goodnight and telling her he loved her. Clara mourned him deeply, but she did not break. She had learned long ago that she was stronger than she thought, that she could weather loss and keep going. Nathan had taught her that, had shown her through his own steadfast love that she was capable of anything. She lived another 5 years after Nathan's death, surrounded by family and filled with memories. She taught her great-great-grandchildren to bake, showing them the same sifting technique she had shown their parents and grandparents before them. She told them stories about their great-grandfather, about the cowboy who had loved her with his whole heart and made her believe in second chances. On a quiet morning in February of 1920, Clara passed away in the same bed where Nathan had died, her last thoughts of the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything. She went peacefully, a smile on her lips, and those who found her said she looked younger somehow, As if in death she had shed the years and become again the woman who had stood in a bakery with flour in her hair and hope in her heart. They buried her next to Nathan under the cottonwood trees by the river, the spot where they had taken their family on Sunday afternoons. The whole town turned out for the funeral, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by Clara and Nathan's love story. James gave the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about his parents' devotion to each other and to their family. "They showed us what it means to truly love someone," he said, "to choose them every day, through easy times and hard. They sifted through each other's flaws and stayed, and in doing so, they created a legacy that will live on in all of us." As the sun set on Clara's funeral, her great-granddaughter Clary stood at the grave with her own daughter, a little girl of 5 named Clara Rose. The child held a handful of dandelions, the same kind of treasure her great-great-grandfather had once brought to her great-great-grandmother all those years ago. "Can I put these on great-grandma's grave?" the little girl asked. "Of course, sweetheart," Clary said, and watched as her daughter carefully placed the flowers on the fresh earth. Standing there in the fading light, Clary thought about the story she had been told so many times, about a cowboy who walked into a bakery and a woman who chose to take a chance on love. She thought about the flour sifter her grandmother had given her, the same one Clara had used for nearly 40 years. She thought about legacy and love and the way both echoed forward through time. "Tell me the story again, Mama," little Clara Rose said, taking her mother's hand. "About great-grandma and the cowboy." So Clary did, standing in the twilight by the graves of her great-grandparents, passing on the story the way it had been passed to her. She told it the way Clara would have wanted, with all the love and honesty and hope that had defined Clara and Nathan's life together. "Once upon a time," Clary began, "there was a woman who sifted flour with care, and a cowboy who asked her to sift through his flaws and stay. And she did stay, and they built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a love that lives on in all of us who carry their blood and their memory." The little girl listened with wide eyes, and Clary knew she would tell this story to her own children someday, and they would tell theirs. The story of Clara and Nathan would become family legend, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of choosing love even when it was frightening, even when it was uncertain. Because in the end, that was what Clara and Nathan had done. They had chosen each other, flaws and all, and they had built something beautiful. They had shown everyone who knew them that love was not about perfection, but about acceptance and commitment and showing up every day. As Clary led her daughter away from the gravesite, the last rays of sunlight caught on something shining in the grass. Clary bent to pick it up and found a small heart-shaped stone, smooth and perfect, as if placed there deliberately. She smiled and tucked it into her pocket, a final gift from a great-grandmother who had understood that the smallest gestures could carry the greatest meaning. The bakery still stood in downtown Boise, run now by the 4th generation of the family. On the wall hung a photograph of Clara and Nathan, taken on their 25th anniversary. In it, they stood hand in hand, older but still vibrant, looking at each other with expressions of such love that it was impossible not to smile when you saw it. Beneath the photograph was a small plaque that read, "In memory of Clara Sutton Oliver and Nathan Oliver, who showed us that the secret to life is not perfection, but loving someone enough to sift through their flaws and stay." And in the kitchen, still in use after all these years, was Clara's original flour sifter, carefully preserved behind glass. Sometimes, when the light hit it just right, you could almost see the ghost of flour falling through the mesh, could almost hear Clara's gentle voice explaining that nothing worth having was without its imperfections, that real love meant accepting the whole of someone, lumps and all. The story of Clara and Nathan became part of Boise's history, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But for those who had known them, who had seen the way they looked at each other even after decades together, it was simply the truth. They had loved each other with their whole hearts, and in doing so, they had created something that death could not diminish. Years turned into decades, and Boise grew from a frontier town into a modern city. The ranch prospered under successive generations of Olivers, and the bakery remained a beloved institution. Great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories about the woman who ran a bakery and the cowboy who loved her, and those stories shaped how they understood love and commitment. On the 100th anniversary of Clara and Nathan's first meeting, the family gathered again by the river, 5 generations strong. They brought bread from the bakery and scattered it for the birds, a gesture Clara would have appreciated. They told the old stories and shared memories, keeping alive the legacy of 2 people who had dared to choose love when it would have been easier to stay safe. As the sun set over the Idaho hills that evening, casting long shadows across the land Clara and Nathan had called home, their descendants raised glasses in a toast. "To Clara and Nathan," they said, "who taught us that the greatest adventure is loving someone enough to stay." And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when bodies give out, Clara and Nathan smiled. Their story had not ended with death. It lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched, a testament to the enduring power of love freely given and faithfully kept. The flour still fell through sifters in the bakery, fine and even, the lumps separated from the good. But the lesson remained the same one Clara had taught so long ago. Sometimes the lumps were what made things special, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was choose to keep them, to work with them, to make something beautiful despite the imperfections. That was the legacy Clara and Nathan left behind. Not just a successful business or a large family, but a living example of what it meant to love someone completely, to see their flaws and choose them anyway, to build a life together one day at a time until those days added up to forever. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.